You've never met the real you, and you're not ready to. You think you know who you are, that the voice in your head is yours, that your habits, your preferences, your fears, all of it somehow amounts to a coherent self. But what if that you is just a front, a mask carefully shaped by the people around you, the expectations you've tried to meet, the shame you've tried to hide? What if the real you, the one that hides in your dreams, the one that resists your control, the one that doesn't speak in words, is someone you've never truly encountered? Or worse, someone you don't want to. You've lived your entire life in the surface layers of your mind. You identify with what you see in the mirror, with the names you answer to, with the roles you've been assigned: son, daughter, student, artist, thinker. But none of these are you. They are performances, personas, protective armor for the ego. The real you, the unconscious self, doesn't perform. It watches, it remembers, it shapes your actions silently without asking permission. And it is tired of being ignored. Carl Jung called it the self. Not the ego, not your social identity, but the totality of your being, conscious, unconscious, and all the shadows in between. He believed that most people never meet this self because doing so would require a brutal confrontation with everything they've denied, repressed, or disowned. Your anger, your lust, your envy, your fear, your rage, your weakness, your violence. The parts of you you'd rather bury are the very keys to becoming whole. And yet, you keep them locked away. You pretend they're not there, but they are, and they're waiting. Every time you feel a sudden irrational reaction, that surge of panic, that wave of shame, that inexplicable resistance, it's not weakness. It's your unconscious pushing back. It's the real you reminding you that it exists, even if you've forgotten. And the longer you avoid it, the stronger it becomes. The more it haunts your dreams, the more it sabotages your relationships, the more it bends reality to force you into facing yourself. You see, the unconscious doesn't stay silent forever. What you refuse to face becomes fate. The harder you try to repress the real you, the more violently it resurfaces, in neuroses, in obsession, in addiction, in depression. Not because you're broken, but because you're unfinished. You've mistaken survival for authenticity, adaptation for identity, and now the cracks are showing. Now the dream self knocks louder, and you still turn away. But ask yourself this: what are you so afraid you'll see? That you're not as good as you pretend? That the feelings you disown are more you than the mask you've worn your whole life? That beneath your polished intellect lies a creature that doesn't care about politeness or approval, only hunger, pain, longing, fear. You've been raised to believe that the point of life is to become someone. But Jung would say, the real task is to unbecome everything you were trained to be, so that you can finally meet the person you were before the world got to you. You've never met the real you, not because you can't, but because you haven't dared to. The self doesn't emerge gently. It comes like a storm. It disorients, it overwhelms, it reveals, and it demands a sacrifice. Your illusions, your control, your certainty. It drags you into the labyrinth of your own psyche, and it leaves you there until you learn to see in the dark. And that's where the work begins. Not in trying to be better, stronger, wiser, but in becoming more whole, in reclaiming every part of yourself that you banished, in listening to your dreams not as nonsense, but as sacred messages from below, in treating your anxieties not as errors, but as guides, in realizing that the self does not speak in words. It speaks in symbols, in tensions, in silence, and it waits patiently. For the moment you stop running, you think you know who you are, but you don't. What you know is the mask you wear to survive, the mask that smiles when you're afraid, the mask that agrees when you want to scream, the mask that keeps you safe, but also keeps you small. And the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to remove. But somewhere inside you, the real you watches. It watches you go through routines that mean nothing to you. It watches you lie to yourself about what you want. It watches you apologize for existing, and it waits, because it knows that sooner or later, you'll break. Sooner or later, the persona will crack, and in that moment of collapse, that sacred unmasking, you will see something in the mirror that both terrifies and frees you, the first glimpse of yourself. But let me warn you, this encounter will not be peaceful. It will not be pretty. It will not be cinematic. It will feel like dying, because part of you will die. The part that depended on being seen a certain way, the part that chased approval, the part that never asked what it truly wanted. But what emerges from that death is not weakness. It's not madness. It's not shame. It's clarity. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. Not good, not perfect, whole. That means holding light and dark in the same body. That means loving the parts of yourself you were told to fear. That means accepting that you are both the healer and the wound, the dreamer and the monster, the mask and the face underneath. And that's why most people never take the journey, because becoming whole requires surrendering the illusion of being in control. It requires saying goodbye to who you thought you were. It means sitting with your own shadow, not as an enemy, but as a mirror. It means discovering that everything you thought was wrong with you was simply the part that hadn't been heard. So lie still, breathe slow, and listen. You are not who you think you are, but the real you is not far. It's in the tension, it's in the silence, it's in the dreams you forget too quickly, it's in the thoughts you try to push away. It's been knocking all your life. And now, maybe, you're finally ready to open the door. Because the scariest thing isn't that the real you is a monster. The scariest thing is that the real you is still a stranger, and it's been watching you sleep. Your dreams know what you're hiding from. You close your eyes and think you're escaping. You welcome the dark like a silent refuge. No more choices to make, no more masks to wear. Just sleep, the one place where you can forget yourself. But you're wrong. Sleep is not silence. Sleep is not absence. Sleep is not peace. It's the entrance to a place deeper than your thoughts, older than your language, closer to the truth than anything you admit by day. You don't fall asleep. You fall inward, and something in there is watching you. Carl Jung believed that dreams are not random static, not debris of consciousness, not meaningless symbols to be ignored. They are maps, keys, mirrors. They are the messages your unconscious sends when it's tired of being ignored. While you lie still, your mind descends into images, into archetypes, into fears that take shape, into desires that wear masks, and into truths you can't yet bear to face. Dreams are not lies. They are metaphors that tell the truth sideways. You dream of falling, but it's not gravity, it's failure. You dream of teeth crumbling, but it's not dental, it's loss of control. You dream of someone you hate loving you, and you wake up disturbed. Why? Because the dream doesn't care what you approve of. It cares what's real. And what's real is what you've buried. There is no censorship in dreams, no social filter, no public mask. That's why they feel strange. That's why they disturb you. That's why you forget them as soon as you wake. Not because they're weak, but because they're too close. They come from the parts of you that remember what your waking mind has edited out. They come from the shadow, from the self, from the vast subterranean landscape you refuse to explore. Think about the dreams that return, the places you visit over and over, the people who appear in distorted forms, the terror that wakes you up gasping. These aren't random. These are patterns, echoes, attempts. The unconscious doesn't scream. It whispers. It paints. It composes scenes that frighten or seduce or confuse, because it knows that direct truth would shatter you. So it cloaks the truth in symbol, not to hide it, but to protect you from it until you're ready. But you never feel ready, do you? So you dismiss them. You say it was just a dream, as if just explains anything, as if your dreams haven't been trying to tell you something for years, that you are not whole, that you are not listening, that you are hiding from something crucial, not outside you, inside. Maybe it's a wound, a shame you never confessed, a fear you inherited, a part of yourself you banished so long ago you forgot it had a voice. But the dream remembers, and every time it returns, in different forms, in different colors, through different faces, it's trying to bring you home. There's a reason you can't control your dreams, a reason they break your logic, a reason they collapse time and space and identity, because they don't live by your rules. They live by deeper laws, the laws of the unconscious. And in that realm, everything is true, even if it contradicts itself. You are the killer and the victim, the lover and the exile, the child and the parent, the witness and the wound. You don't analyze a dream to decode it like a puzzle. You enter it like a forest. You walk carefully. You listen. You feel. You ask what the image wants from you, not what it means, but what it's offering. Because dreams aren't codes. They are invitations. Invitations to meet the parts of yourself you've been running from. Jung said that the dream is the most natural expression of the unconscious, that within it lives the map to the self. And yet most of us discard it. Why? Because it threatens the illusion of control. Because it doesn't flatter the ego. Because it speaks in a language the mind didn't choose. You say you want to understand yourself, but do you? Really? Would you be willing to meet the version of you that appears in your dreams? The one who says what you won't say. The one who wants what you pretend not to. The one who walks into rooms you've kept locked for decades? That's the work. Not to chase enlightenment, but to listen to the symbols. To respect what visits you in the night, not as hallucination, but as revelation. There are no meaningless dreams, only forgotten ones, no harmless dreams, only ones you refuse to interpret. No peaceful dreams, only those whose message you haven't yet heard. The dream is the doorway, and the threshold is always fear. But if you step through, if you let yourself feel the terror, the confusion, the wildness, you might begin to hear what the unconscious has been trying to say all along. You are not who you think you are. You are older. You are deeper. You are full of strangers you haven't met. And they speak at night. So next time you wake in sweat, or with tears you can't explain, or with a lingering image that won't leave you alone, don't scroll. Don't move on. Don't tell yourself it was nothing. It was everything. And it came for you. Because you're ready. Because you're breaking. Because you've hidden for too long. Your dreams don't lie. They remember. And they are waiting for you to stop pretending you don't understand. The shadow you ignore is the one pulling the strings. You think you're making choices. You think your goals are your own, your desires natural, your reactions justified. You believe you're the author of your life, conscious, intentional, awake. But if that were true, why do you keep ending up in the same places? Why do your relationships collapse the same way? Why do your fears wear new masks, only to bring back the same ache? Why does progress feel like rotation? Maybe it's not because you're weak. Maybe it's because you're not alone in your decisions. Maybe there's something behind the curtain, shaping every move while you keep your eyes on the stage. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of you you refuse to see, the impulses you disown, the thoughts you deny, the emotions you shame, the memories you lock away so deeply you forget they ever happened. But forgetting isn't deleting. What's buried isn't dead. It acts quietly, persistently, and with remarkable precision. The shadow is not a flaw. It's not a mistake. It's not even evil. It is simply the other half of you, the half you're too afraid to claim. It carries everything you've rejected in order to survive, to belong, to be loved. And because it's rejected, it grows strong in silence. You don't hear it, you feel it. In the sudden rage that explodes without reason, in the quiet resentment that poisons connection, in the habits you swear you've outgrown, but keep repeating in secret. You think you're in charge, but if you were, why would you sabotage the very things you say you want? Why would you chase comfort that leads to more pain? Why would you push away the people you need? The answer is not out there. It's inside, in the part of you that's acting without your permission, because it doesn't need your permission. The shadow doesn't negotiate. It doesn't ask. It compensates. You try to be kind, and it hides your bitterness. You try to be humble, and it exaggerates your pride. You try to be calm, and it channels your fury through subtle destruction. The more you deny it, the more clever it becomes. And the more clever it becomes, the more it runs your life. You might think, but I'm a good person. That's the trap. The shadow thrives in goodness that refuses to look down, in virtue that refuses to admit its cost, in peace that exists only on the surface. True morality, Jung insisted, is impossible without knowing your shadow, because until you know what you're capable of, you don't understand what you're choosing. You're just following a script, one that someone else wrote for you, long before you had a say. And yet, you don't want to face it. Because what if your shadow is a monster? What if it's everything you were told to avoid? What if it wants what you can't accept? So you pretend it's not there. You numb it with distractions. You drown it in productivity. You baptize it in spirituality. But it doesn't leave. It waits. It watches. And in moments of weakness it acts. Not to destroy you, to remind you. The shadow doesn't hate you. It's not trying to punish you. It simply wants to be seen, to be named, to be included in the story of who you are. Not because it's good, but because it's yours. You cannot amputate your way to wholeness. You cannot be free by cutting yourself in half. You cannot heal by pretending only half of you exists. Everything you repress becomes a decision you didn't realize you made. The shadow pulls the strings not by force, but by default. You don't control what you don't face, and what you don't control becomes your fate. Jung saw this everywhere, in personal lives, in politics, in culture. The more we try to appear light, the darker our shadows grow. The more we reject our capacity for evil, the more evil emerges disguised as righteousness. The more we deny our own hunger, the more we project it onto others. The shadow is never still. It moves through us, through institutions, through ideologies, through history. Every time a person or a culture insists it is pure, a shadow begins to grow, just beneath the surface. You might be afraid that facing your shadow will make you worse, but the opposite is true. Until you see it, you are worse, because you act without knowing who's truly speaking through you. But when you face it, when you look into its eyes and say, "I see you," something shifts. It doesn't disappear, but it softens. It doesn't sabotage. It warns. It becomes an ally, not one you trust blindly, but one you respect. And this is the turning point. You don't need to fix the shadow. You need to listen, not obey, not indulge, but witness, to hear its anger and ask where it comes from, to notice its desire and ask what it's pointing to feel its pain and ask what was never healed. Freedom does not come from elimination. It comes from integration, and integration requires humility. The humility to admit you are not only who you pretend to be, that within you lives contradiction, confusion, even cruelty. And that doesn't make you evil. It makes you human. The strings will keep pulling until you follow them to their source. And when you do, you'll find not a demon, but a mirror. One you've avoided because it doesn't flatter. One that reflects the parts of you that never had permission to exist. But those parts are not going away. They don't need to be feared. They need to be met. Because the more you ignore the shadow, the more it controls you. The more you try to dominate it, the more it controls others through you. But when you own it, when you name it, when you stop pretending that you are only light, then the strings fall away. Not because the shadow vanishes, but because it no longer needs to act in secret. You become free not by becoming pure. You become free by becoming whole. And wholeness begins where the mask ends. Until you become what you fear, you'll never be free. You spend your life avoiding it, that image, that feeling, that part of yourself you've learned to hate. You avoid it by being good, by being smart, by being controlled, by being spiritual, even by being kind. But underneath every strategy, every polished version of yourself, every success and setback, there's something you're still running from, something you never chose, but something you carry, a shape, a mood, a memory, a desire, a violence, a shadow. You were taught to call it wrong, taught to suppress it, taught to fear it. But what if it's the key? Carl Jung wrote that freedom doesn't come from becoming more virtuous or more perfect. It comes from becoming more whole. And wholeness is not light. It is not purity. It is not calm. It is integration. You don't become yourself by becoming better. You become yourself by becoming full. That means stepping into the dark parts. That means becoming, at least for a moment, the very thing you fear. You've spent years trying to avoid certain feelings, rage, lust, grief, shame. You've convinced yourself that being above them makes you evolved. But in truth, it makes you split. What you avoid owns you. What you reject becomes your master. What you exile becomes your fate. Because what you fear isn't just out there in the world, it's also in you. And no matter how far you run, you can't outrun yourself. There is a part of you you pretend doesn't exist. A part that wants what it shouldn't. A part that resents. A part that manipulates. A part that fantasizes about destruction, about power, about surrender. You tell yourself that's not the real you. But it is. Not all of you, but a part. And you will never be whole until you invite it to speak. The ego wants safety, certainty, control. But the self, the deep, full self, wants expansion. And that means stepping into the unknown, into discomfort, into the exact space you've always avoided. That's where your transformation lives. Not in more effort, more achievement, more self-control, but in surrender. Not to chaos, not to impulse, but to the truth that you are not only the part you like, you're also the part you fear. Look at your life, at the things you can't stop repeating, the patterns, the failures, the breakdowns. These aren't just accidents, they're invitations. Invitations to face what you've disowned. The rage you suppress shows up in your passive resentment. The desire you hide shows up in your apathy. The pain you avoid shows up in your constant need for distraction. You think you're controlling it, but it's controlling you, gently, invisibly, entirely. So what does it mean to become what you fear? It doesn't mean to act out your worst impulses. It doesn't mean to indulge recklessly. It means to integrate, to walk into the image, not to be consumed by it, but to understand it. It means to enter the fear and say, I see you. I know you're part of me, and I'm done pretending you're not. Because the truth is, your fear is not just fear. It's memory. It's power. It's the edge of your transformation. It is the container where your unlived life waits. You fear your anger. Inside it is your strength. You fear your desire. Inside it is your vitality. You fear your grief. Inside it is your capacity for love. Every fear hides a gift, but you have to go through it to reach it. Jung warned that the person who looks outside dreams, but the person who looks inside awakens. That awakening is not gentle, it burns, it disorients, it unravels your ideas of who you are. But in the ashes of that unraveling, you find something more honest than any mask you've worn. You will never be free by becoming more like your ideal. You will be free when you stop needing the ideal. When you stop measuring your worth by how far you are from the parts of yourself you're ashamed of. You are not here to be pure. You are here to be whole. And that means looking at the fear, speaking to it, walking with it. Maybe what you fear isn't bad. Maybe it's simply unfamiliar, uncomfortable, forbidden. Maybe it's a version of you that never got the chance to exist. The one who wasn't afraid to speak. The one who didn't shrink. The one who knew how to say no without guilt. You buried that one. And now the fear is a signal. It's pointing you back to them. This is the paradox. You become free, not by escaping your fear, but by embodying it, by letting it live in you, not as a threat, but as a teacher. You can't liberate yourself with avoidance. You liberate yourself with presence, with courage, with truth. Not all truth is beautiful, but all truth is necessary, especially the truth you've always run from. So the next time something terrifies you, not in the world, but inside, Ask what it wants to show you. Sit with it. Watch it. Let it breathe. You'll feel like you're dying. But what's dying is the illusion of control. What's dying is the lie that you can live without contradiction. And when that lie dies, you're born again. Not perfect, not fixed, but whole. You are not meant to be pure. You are meant to be vast. You are meant to contain the light and the dark, the known and the hidden, the sacred and the broken. Freedom doesn't come after you destroy the shadow. It comes when you welcome it home. Until you become what you fear, you'll keep building your prison. You'll keep calling it morality. You'll keep calling it discipline. You'll keep calling it peace. But peace isn't the absence of fear. Peace is walking through fear and coming out with yourself still intact. The monster inside you woke up before you did. There is something inside you that never sleeps, something older than your thoughts, more primal than your name, and far less interested in being understood. It doesn't care how good you try to be. It doesn't care how polite, how rational, how spiritual. It just waits. Beneath every conversation, behind every impulse you can't explain, it stirs. You wake up each morning thinking you're the one in control. That consciousness begins with your eyes opening. But that's not true. You don't wake up alone. Something inside you has already opened its eyes, long before you do. Something watches you, something ancient, and it knows what you're trying to forget. Carl Jung called it the shadow, not evil, not demonic, but real. Real in a way that few people ever dare to face. The shadow is every part of you you've disowned, denied, repressed. It's your rage when you smile, your lust when you pretend to be pure, your envy dressed as false admiration. The shadow is your twin, the one you abandoned, and it never left. You did. You ran. You tried to become only light, but it stayed behind, curled in the dark, watching. Most people think they're moral because they act good. But Jung would say, morality without integration is just performance. And your performance is exhausting. You are not whole, you are split. You've been told to rise above your instincts, to banish the beast within. But you've only made it hungrier. The more you suppress, the more you split. And the more you split, the more that hidden self moves in the dark, shaping your choices, your fears, your breakdowns. The truth is, the monster is not outside you. It never was. It's not society. It's not trauma. It's not even your parents. It's you. The part of you that still remembers what it means to be animal, what it means to be raw, and it is not ashamed. You are. That's the difference. The shadow does not ask to be forgiven. It does not want to be redeemed. It wants to be seen, not worshipped, not destroyed, just seen. But you don't want to see it, because if you do, you'll have to admit that your goodness isn't natural, that it's constructed, fragile, that it trembles when confronted by the real. You've built a life on top of a cellar you refuse to explore. But what you don't realize is that the door to that cellar has been open all along. And every time you overreact, every time you sabotage something good, every time you feel a hatred you can't explain, that's the monster's voice, not to hurt you, but to wake you. You think the goal is to kill the monster. Jung would say the goal is to integrate it, to make peace with the darkness inside you so that it doesn't have to scream to be heard. Because the monster is not your enemy. It's your shadow. It holds the energy you need to become whole. And that energy, your rage, your hunger, your pain, It's not evil. It's unloved. It's exiled. It's waiting for you to stop pretending. You've spent your life trying to be clean, trying to rise above the mud. But that mud is part of you. It holds roots. It holds memory. It holds power. You think you're broken because you still feel rage, that you still want things you shouldn't, that your thoughts are darker than you'd ever say out loud. You're not broken. You're divided. You're running from your own blood. And the monster knows. It knows the lies you tell yourself to feel safe. It knows the people you cling to so you don't have to be alone with your thoughts. It knows the rituals you follow just to keep your reflection intact. And it knows that every smile hides a scream. Every silence hides a storm. Every kindness hides a question. How long can I keep this up? But the monster doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't flatter. It just waits. Until you're alone. Until your defenses are down. Until the night is too quiet. Until the mirror starts to look back. And when it speaks, it doesn't use words. It uses feelings. Panic, disgust, urge, emptiness, obsession. And you try to suppress it, but it grows. Because the only way out is through. And the only way through is down. Down into the body. Down into the instincts. Down into the places you were taught to fear. That's where the monster lives. And that's where you'll find your truth. Not the truth that makes you feel good. The truth that sets you free. But freedom is not peace. It is confrontation. It is holding your shadow by the hand and walking into the dark together. It is saying, I see you. I won't run. It is realizing that you are not above the monster. You are the monster. And the sooner you accept that, the less power it has over you. You've spent your whole life trying to be the light. But light without shadow is blinding, useless, flat. And when the monster inside you opened its eyes this morning, before you did, it wasn't there to hurt you. It was there to remind you. You are not whole yet, and you won't be until you stop pretending to be pure. You're just a mask that forgot it's not real. You walk through life believing you're someone. You have a name, a voice, a posture you've trained, a way of speaking that makes others comfortable. You have opinions that feel solid, reactions that feel yours, and a story you repeat to yourself when you need to remember who you are. But none of this is you. Not really. What you call you is a mask, a carefully assembled persona built over years of fear, shame, imitation, and hope. It didn't start with a decision. It started with survival. You learned how to be seen, how to be accepted, and slowly, imperceptibly, you became the performance. Carl Jung called this the persona. Not just a public face, but a substitute self. It's the part of you that knows how to function in the world, the part that adapts, the part that says, I'm fine when you're breaking, the part that smiles when you want to scream. It protects you. It connects you. It keeps you safe. But it also traps you. Because at some point, you forgot that it was a mask. You began to think it was your skin. This is the tragedy of the modern self. Not that we wear masks, that's inevitable, but that we mistake them for who we truly are. And once that happens, we begin to fear anything that might crack the surface. We avoid silence because silence might reveal something unscripted. We avoid intimacy because someone might touch the part beneath the mask. We avoid change because it threatens the continuity of the story. And worst of all, we begin to fear the very thing that could save us, the collapse of the persona. You weren't born a mask. You were born wild, unfiltered, raw. But that rawness was too much for the world, or so you were told. You learned to shave off the parts that scared people, the emotions that came too strong, the thoughts that made others uncomfortable, the needs that weren't convenient. Bit by bit, you curated yourself. You became a version of yourself that was acceptable, and over time the original faded, not gone, just buried. But buried things don't die, they fester. The real you, the unmasked self, watches. It watches you play roles that feel hollow. It watches you compromise to be liked. It watches you avoid the mirror when your eyes are too tired to lie. And it waits, not to destroy you, but to be remembered. The persona isn't evil, it's necessary. Society runs on masks, but masks are meant to be worn, not inhabited. The moment you believe your mask is your face, you lose something vital. You lose the ability to feel your own truth, to say no without explanation, to desire without apology, to cry without shame, to be without performance. And yet you cling to the mask. Why? Because it works. Because it keeps people from leaving. Because it makes life predictable. Because it gives you a script to follow when the silence becomes too loud. But every script is a prison. And the longer you follow it, the more distant you become from the voice that lives underneath. You've started to notice it, haven't you? The cracks, the quiet sense that something is off. That even when everything looks fine, something inside aches. That your success feels hollow. That your relationships feel rehearsed. That your dreams feel irrelevant. This isn't depression. It's not anxiety. It's the soul knocking, asking, when did we forget who we are? Jung believed that the persona must break, not completely, but enough. Enough to let the self breathe, enough to let the shadow speak, enough to let the truth out before it devours you from the inside. But breaking the mask is terrifying, because once it's gone, you have no script, no map, no approval to chase. You have to stand naked before the world, and worse, before yourself. You may begin to wonder, if I remove the mask, will anything be left? Will there be a self underneath, or just a void? This is the existential terror, that beneath the persona lies not truth, but absence. That you are nothing without your performance, that your identity is an illusion, and that without it, you might disappear. But the opposite is true. Only when the mask slips can you breathe deeply. Only then can you feel what's been repressed. Only then can you cry the tears that were postponed for decades. Only then can you laugh, not politely, but wildly. Only then can you want what you really want, without translating it into something acceptable. That's not loss. That's awakening. The persona cannot be removed all at once. It peels away slowly, in moments of honesty, in flashes of pain, in midnight confessions, in dreams that you remember for no reason, in the way your voice shakes when you finally say what you actually think. Each moment reveals a fragment of what's beneath. And what's beneath is not a monster, not a fraud, but a self, scared, hidden, luminous. You don't need to destroy your persona. You need to stop worshiping it, to recognize it as a tool, not a god, to wear it lightly, like a coat, not a skin, to know when to take it off, and most of all to stop believing that without it, you are nothing. You are not your name. You are not your story. You are not the voice you practiced. You are not the good impression you try to leave behind. You are the one watching all of that happen. the one who trembles beneath the surface, the one who feels like a stranger in their own skin, the one who longs to be seen, not as a role, but as real. But no one can see you until you see yourself. And to do that, you must stand in the silence with the mask in your hand and ask the question you've always feared. If I stop pretending, who will I become? Everything you've buried is quietly controlling your life. You think you're in control. You look in the mirror and see someone who makes choices, who has reasons, who knows what they're doing. You tell yourself that your life is a product of your will, your planning, your decisions. But beneath all of that, there's something else, something older, something deeper, something you forgot how to see. And it's been running the show from the beginning. Carl Jung believed that whatever we do not make conscious will return as fate. That means everything you repress, every memory you shut down, every emotion you swallow, every impulse you label as wrong or shameful, does not disappear. It waits. And it doesn't just wait in silence. It begins to shape you, subtly, invisibly, irrevocably. What you refuse to confront will find its way back to you, through your fears, your patterns, your compulsions, your breakdowns, not as punishment, as a message. You are not taught to feel. You are taught to behave, to function, to fit in. And to do that, you learned to bury. When you were hurt and told to be strong, you buried the pain. When you were angry and told to calm down, you buried the fire. When you were scared and told not to cry, you buried the fear. Over time, the graveyard grew, and you started calling it your personality. But a personality built on repression is a fragile mask. It holds until it doesn't, until the pressure breaks through the surface in ways you can't predict. That unexplained sadness, that irrational outburst, that constant self-sabotage, that endless repetition of choices you promised never to make again. You think these things are flaws, symptoms, random malfunctions of your emotional machinery. But they are signals. They are the voice of what's been buried, and it is done being ignored. The unconscious is not silent. It's just subtle. It doesn't scream. It distorts. It twists your relationships into mirrors. It turns your career into a maze. It infects your joy with guilt, your success with fear, your intimacy with doubt. And you don't know why. You think you're unlucky, broken, cursed. But you're not. You're just haunted, not by spirits, but by your own exiled self. Jung called this the return of the repressed. The psyche cannot tolerate division forever. What you try to split off will eventually circle back. But it doesn't knock gently. It slips in. It whispers. It acts through you. And the more you deny it, the more power it has. Because when you repress something, you give it autonomy. You stop being its master. It becomes yours. This is not poetic metaphor. This is your everyday life. Look at your habits, the ones you hate but can't stop. Look at your fears, the ones that control your decisions. Look at your relationships, the ones that collapse in the same patterns. This is not coincidence. This is architecture. Psychological architecture, designed by the things you thought you had buried. You are taught to move on, but what isn't faced is never past. It is buried alive, and alive things grow. That shame from childhood, it became your perfectionism. That fear of abandonment, it became your need to control. That unspoken grief, it became your numbness. And you call it maturity, growth, discipline, but all it is adaptation, clever, elegant, slowly suffocating. You wonder why you're tired, why you can't rest, why joy feels like something borrowed. Because holding down the buried takes energy, constant vigilance. You're not just living your life, you are managing a cage inside yourself. And the more refined your cage, the less you even notice it's there. Until something breaks, a dream, a mistake, a silence, and suddenly you feel the pressure, the tremble, the weight of something trying to rise. That is the invitation, not to collapse, but to turn around, to descend, to dig, not to find monsters, but to find your voice, the one you lost when you learned to be acceptable. The psyche wants wholeness, not comfort, not peace, wholeness. And wholeness means integration. It means letting the grief speak, letting the anger burn, letting the desire breathe, not acting on everything but honoring its presence, listening without shame, witnessing without judgment, accepting without erasing. You think you've made it this far because you're strong, but maybe you've just been good at burying things, and now those things want out, not to ruin you, to return you. Because who you are is not the mask, not the role, not the polished version you show the world. Who you are is still waiting in the dark, beneath the weight of everything you said you'd deal with later. But later is now. The cracks are forming, the armor is heavy, and you can feel it, that ache, that pull, that eerie sense that something's watching from within. It is. It always has been. And it's time. Time to feel what you've avoided. Time to hear the memory behind the silence. Time to meet the self beneath the survival strategy. Everything you've buried is quietly controlling your life, and it will keep doing so until you stop running from it and start listening. Because repression is not healing. Control is not freedom. Avoidance is not peace. They are just masks, temporary, brittle, and eventually unbearable. But when you finally face the buried, when you let the pain speak, when you let the image surface, when you let the fear shake you, you'll find something else waiting beneath all of it. Not destruction, not insanity, but truth. And truth doesn't hurt. What hurts is resisting it. You're not too broken, you're too full, and now it's spilling out, not to drown you, to cleanse you, to return you to yourself. What you fear most is what you secretly crave. You keep your distance. You avoid the subject. You change the conversation. You distract yourself. You say it doesn't matter, that you've outgrown it, that you're above it. But late at night when the noise fades, something stirs. A thought, a sensation, a magnetic pull toward the very thing you've sworn to escape. Not because you're careless, but because part of you still wants it, deeply, secretly, shamefully. And that's what terrifies you the most. Not that the fear is real, but that your desire is. Carl Jung taught that the psyche is not a battlefield between good and evil, but a paradox, a web of contradictions, oppositions, tensions. And perhaps the most terrifying truth it contains is this: what you most fear is often what you most long for. Not because you're broken, because you're unfinished. You were never taught how to hold opposites, so you split them. You learn that love must be clean, that strength must be silent, that longing must be hidden, that fear must be conquered. But the parts of you that don't fit into that mold didn't disappear. They went underground, and they became cravings. You fear intimacy, but you crave it. You fear being seen, but you ache for it. You fear power, but you fantasize about control. You fear letting go, but you long to be held. You fear failure, but you dream of freedom from performance. These contradictions are not hypocrisy. They are maps, pointing you toward the places where your soul has been torn in half. The fear is the defense. The craving is the signal. Your psyche uses fear to protect you from what once hurt, and desire to remind you of what you still need. And when those two forces meet, they don't cancel each other out. They bind. They twist into a knot that pulses beneath the surface of your choices. You say no on the outside, but inside, there is a soft, persistent whisper. Please, just this once. You hate yourself for it, for wanting what you said you wouldn't, for imagining the unacceptable, for needing what doesn't make sense. But that hate is another defense, one that keeps you from asking the real question. Why is this still alive in me? What is the story behind this craving? What is the wound it formed around? What is the life I was not allowed to live? Jung believed that the unconscious doesn't waste energy. If something persists, it has a reason. Repetition is not failure. It is insistence. The psyche repeats what it hasn't resolved, not to torment you, to be seen, to be heard, to be integrated. Because as long as you fight the craving without listening to it, you remain trapped in the war. But if you stop fighting, not to surrender, but to understand, the shape of the fear begins to shift. You fear intimacy, maybe because once connection meant danger. So now the longing feels like a trap. You fear visibility because attention once meant judgment. So now you hide behind irony or silence. You fear power because once it was used to hurt. So now you pretend you don't want any. But these fears are not the end of the story. Beneath them lies the part of you that still believes in what was lost, that still aches for what never arrived, that still wants what you're afraid you don't deserve. Desire is not the enemy, but desire without awareness becomes obsession, compulsion, collapse. That's why fear steps in, to guard you from the fire. But the fire isn't evil. It's just untended. It needs containment. It needs ritual. It needs context. If you can't name what you want, you'll keep chasing shadows. If you can't admit what you fear, you'll keep running from your own footsteps. This is the paradox Jung called the union of opposites. You are not one thing. You are not good or bad, brave or afraid, pure or corrupted. You are all of it. And wholeness comes not from choosing one side, but from holding both. From standing at the point where fear and desire meet and refusing to turn away. But it hurts, because what you crave reminds you of what you've been denied, and what you fear reminds you of how much you still care. So you cope. You build a life that avoids the edge. You say you're fine. You say you're focused. You say you've moved on. But at night, in dreams, in quiet, the craving returns, not to shame you, to summon you, because there's a version of you on the other side of that fear, a version that knows what it means to want without apology. That doesn't mean acting on every impulse. It means owning the tension. It means not moralizing your inner world into silence. It means creating space inside yourself where fear and desire can speak without censorship. And that takes courage, because it's easier to shame yourself than to ask why the fear still exists, why the craving still burns, why the thing you say you hate still lives inside your body. Freedom doesn't come from discipline alone. It comes from intimacy with your own contradictions. It comes from learning to walk with what frightens you, not because you're reckless, but because you're whole. You don't need to fix the craving. You need to learn what it's pointing to. You don't need to kill the fear. You need to ask what it's protecting. Maybe what you fear is not darkness, but light you weren't allowed to shine. Maybe what you crave isn't danger, but aliveness you were taught to suppress. Maybe what you reject in others is what you secretly lost in yourself. And maybe, just maybe, your fear is not a warning. It's a threshold, and your craving is not your shame. It's your way home. You're not thinking, you're being thought. You believe you're the thinker, the source of your ideas, the one who weighs options, forms opinions, considers evidence, and makes decisions. You believe that when a thought appears, it's yours, that it came from you, that you are in control of the mind you live inside. But look closer. Where did the thought come from? Why did it arrive now in that tone, with that image wrapped in that feeling? Did you choose it, or did it choose you? Carl Jung would say, you are not thinking, you are being thought. Because thought is not only rational, it is symbolic, it is ancestral, it is archetypal. What rises in your mind is not only yours, it is the echo of everything you've ever absorbed, rejected, forgotten. The unconscious does not speak in sentences. It speaks in impulses, images, obsessions. So what you call thinking is often not your will in motion, but the residue of something deeper acting through you. You wake in the morning, and a worry is already waiting. You don't summon it, it's there. You step into a conversation, and a strange anger starts rising. You don't decide it, it floods you. You try to concentrate, and suddenly a memory hijacks your awareness. These aren't choices, they are events. Events inside you, triggered by forces you cannot see. And they are not random, they are patterns. The thoughts that rule you the most are not the ones you notice. They're the ones you never question, the ones that feel like background truth, the ones that whisper, you're too much, you'll never change, they're going to leave, this will go wrong, you're falling behind. These aren't facts, they're inherited voices, fragments from childhood, echoes of your culture, scripts from wounds that were never healed. But because you didn't choose them, you believe them. And that's the trap. The unconscious does not announce itself. It operates behind the curtain, feeding you thoughts that feel like your own. And the more identified you are with them, the more they define your life. You think you're anxious because you overthink. But maybe you overthink because you've never learned to sit in silence with the thing beneath the thoughts. The ache, the absence, the unmet need. The moment you try, the mind floods you with distractions, conclusions, analysis. Anything to avoid the rawness underneath. Jung called this the defense of the ego. The ego hates uncertainty. It wants order, narrative, control. So it clings to thoughts, even painful ones, because the alternative, the unknown, is worse. But in doing so, it becomes the prisoner of its own chatter. You are not the one who decides when thinking starts. It starts at you. It arrives like weather. And until you learn to watch it, not obey it, not argue with it, but watch, you will be possessed by it. Yes, possessed. Jung meant this literally. The psyche can become possessed by complexes, autonomous clusters of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that operate like mini-personalities. They have their own agendas, their own voice, their own timing. And when you're triggered, one of them steps in, you feel it, that shift, that loss of perspective, that rush of feeling that doesn't match the moment. It's not you, it's a part of you acting through you. So when you say, "I just think this way," ask, who taught you to? What wound gave birth to that pattern? What shadow is speaking? What unlived life is screaming through the language of repetition? This is not a call to stop thinking. It's a call to disidentify from the thinker, to become the observer, the witness, the one who knows that thoughts are not truth. They are symptoms, messages, symbols, invitations. When a thought comes that says, "You're not enough," ask, what part of me believes this? Where did it come from? Who benefits if I keep believing it? You'll find it's not logic speaking. It's memory, pain, habit. Your mind is not your enemy, but it's not your master either. It is a mirror, and if you look deeply enough, you'll see what it's reflecting isn't reality. It's what you haven't yet brought to light. Freedom begins the moment you stop trusting every thought you have. When you can feel anxiety and say, "This is old," instead of "This is real." When you can watch a judgment rise and say, "This is not me," instead of acting it out. When you can sit with the noise and realize, the noise is not who I am. You are not the thinker. You are the one who notices thinking, and that noticing, that gap between thought and reaction, is the beginning of awareness. In that space, everything shifts, not because the thoughts disappear, but because you no longer bow to them. Jung's entire psychology was built around this principle. The unconscious will rule your life until you bring it into consciousness, until you see the pattern, name the voice, feel the origin. You will be lived by something you don't understand. But once you see it, truly see it, the spell breaks. Not instantly, not forever, but enough. Enough to reclaim a piece of yourself from the machinery of habit. So next time your mind floods with noise, don't argue, don't obey, don't panic. Just pause. Ask, who is thinking me right now? What part of me is speaking? What does it want me to believe? And why? You'll be surprised how many of your thoughts don't need to be answered, just heard, just held, just allowed to pass, like wind through an open window. Because thinking will happen. It always does. But suffering begins when you believe the thought is you. You are not your thoughts. You are the sky they pass through. And until you remember that, you won't be thinking. You'll be thought. You won't heal until you hit the bottom first. You keep trying to rise, to get better, to improve, evolve, transcend. You meditate, reflect, journal, speak the right words. You tell yourself that you're healing, that you're moving forward, that time is working. But underneath the surface, deep down, where the noise fades, you know something isn't shifting. Something is stuck, heavy, unchanged. It waits in silence untouched by your efforts, because you've been climbing away from it. And what you don't realize is this: you won't heal by rising. You'll heal by falling, by sinking all the way down to the place you've been avoiding your entire life. Carl Jung knew this. He called it the descent into the unconscious. Not regression, not breakdown, descent. The movement away from illusion and into the truth, even if the truth is unbearable. He believed that real transformation doesn't begin until the ego breaks, until the persona fails, until the mask no longer holds, until you lose the story that gave your suffering meaning, and are left with nothing but rawness. It's in that moment, at the bottom, where healing begins, not before. But you resist the bottom. Everyone does. You say, "I'm fine," when you're not. You say, "I understand now," when you don't. You say, "I'm past it," when it still haunts your dreams. Because to admit that you're still broken feels like weakness, like failure, like defeat. But it isn't. It's just truth. And truth is what heals, not performance. You can't outgrow what you haven't touched. You can't forgive what you've never fully felt. You can't release what you've never truly carried. And healing is not a clean upward arc. It is not a staircase. It is a spiral, a collapse, a return to what hurts again and again until it loses its power, not because it's gone, but because you've stopped turning away. The bottom is not punishment. It is initiation. When everything comfortable is stripped away, when you are left naked before your own shadow, when the narrative crumbles and the silence deafens, that is the beginning. That is when the psyche stops playing along, when the soul stops pretending, when the old self dies, not dramatically but quietly, through exhaustion. You don't find peace by bypassing your pain. You find peace by making room for it, by letting it flood you, by letting it drag you down to the place where you said you'd never return. That room in your memory, that name, that moment, that feeling that still curls like smoke in your chest. You keep trying to rise above it, but it's still here, waiting, not to hurt you, to be honored. You were taught that healing means feeling better, but often healing means falling apart. It means surrendering the lie that you've moved on. It means breaking in new ways, deeper ways, not because you're failing, but because you're finally going far enough to reach the root. There is a moment in descent where everything goes quiet. The defenses fall. The rehearsed answers stop. The distractions lose their grip, and you are left alone with what is real. The ache, the grief, the rage, the need. It doesn't want to be solved. It wants to be seen. And once it is, something ancient in you exhales. Not relief, not yet, but recognition. You will not be free until you meet the part of you that was buried to survive. And that part does not live in the light. It lives at the bottom, in the basement of your psyche, in the cracks you painted over, in the silence you called healing. So, descend, not recklessly, not for drama, but with intention, with courage, with presence. Go where you tremble, go where your voice breaks, go where you last felt helpless. That's the doorway. And when you're there, when everything you built to protect yourself crumbles, don't rebuild yet. Don't rush to explain. Just sit, breathe, listen. Let the memories come. Let the emotions rage. Let the confusion unravel you. You're not failing. You're thawing. Jung wrote that you don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And you can't make it conscious by watching from a distance. You have to go there. You have to descend. You have to stop trying to be okay. Because okay is what you've used to survive. But it's also what's keeping you from healing. Okay is the mask, the smile, the answer that ends the conversation. But real healing begins where language fails, where okay shatters, where the bottom shows you what the surface never could. You won't stay there forever, but you can't skip it. If you rise too early, you bring the wound with you, and it grows, quietly, invisibly, until it pulls you back again, not to punish you, but to finish what was never completed. The bottom is the place where the self splits, and it's also the place where the self returns. When you finally stop escaping, the lost part of you emerges, trembling, furious, sacred. Not a ghost, not a symptom, but you, the one who's been waiting. And that's when the real healing begins. Not when it feels better, but when it feels real. The part of you that can save you is the one you're avoiding. You're searching for answers. You want clarity, peace, strength. You're trying to move forward, to let go, to become the version of yourself that finally makes sense. You read the right books, say the right words, feel the right emotions, or at least the ones that are allowed. But something still isn't working. Some weight stays, some fracture lingers. You think you haven't found the answer yet, but maybe the answer has been waiting for you all along, in the one place you still refuse to look. Carl Jung understood this. He wrote that the self is not just the conscious ego, but a totality, a vast inner landscape that includes everything you know and everything you've forgotten, feared, or disowned. And healing, for him, was not about becoming pure, but about becoming whole. That means that the part of you you're avoiding, the messy part, the dark part, the one you judge, silence, or shame, might not be the problem. It might be the key. You were taught to become better by subtraction, to remove what's wrong, to overcome weakness, to deny anger, to bury shame. But the things you exile don't die. They don't fade. They wait. And sometimes what they become is not disease or dysfunction, but the very medicine you need. There's a version of you that holds your truth, the one who wasn't afraid to speak, the one who loved wildly, the one who felt everything, the one who knew what they wanted before the world taught them to doubt. That version might look chaotic now, undignified, immature, even dangerous, but only because you've spent so long building a mask to replace it. And now the mask is cracking, not to destroy you, to invite you back. The part you avoid is the part that remembers. It remembers the grief you never sat with, the boundaries you never set, the dreams you dismissed to survive. It remembers your fire, your longing, your voice, and it's tired of waiting. You think you're stuck because you haven't found the right method, but you're stuck because you're using healing to bypass the one part of yourself that could actually lead you home. The part that's wild, unruly, angry, honest. The part that doesn't care about performance. The part that doesn't play nice. The part that's raw enough to look the truth in the face and not blink. You avoid it because it doesn't fit the image you've built. You fear it will ruin your life. But maybe the life it would ruin is the one that's already hurting you. The one you constructed around absence, silence, self-denial. Maybe it doesn't want to ruin anything. Maybe it just wants to live. Jung called this the self with a capital S. Not the social self, not the ego, not the compliant self you offer the world. The self is deeper. It's the total integration of who you are and who you've forgotten to be. And the self speaks through the parts of you that you've marginalized, the impulses, the fantasies, the dreams, the symptoms, the breakdowns. These aren't malfunctions, they're messages, they're attempts to get your attention. The part of you that can save you doesn't live in your intellect. It lives in your body, in your instincts, in your intuition. It's the part that says this doesn't feel right before your mind catches up. It's the one that says stop when you keep going. It's the part you silenced long ago. because it threatened the story that made you acceptable. But now that story isn't working anymore. You're exhausted, the mask is heavy, the act is thin, and under the surface that other voice, the one you buried, it's starting to rise. Not with rage, with patience, with a quiet kind of knowing, and all it asks is that you listen. You think healing is about becoming more like your idea of goodness. But what if healing is about becoming more like yourself, including the parts you swore you'd never be? What if your wholeness lives on the other side of your self-rejection? You are not broken, you are divided, and the division is where the pain lives, but also where the bridge begins. A bridge back to the part of you you once exiled to survive. You exiled your courage and called it recklessness. You exiled your truth and called it selfishness. You exiled your boundaries and called it kindness. You exiled your hunger and called it shame. And now everything you crave is hidden in the place you swore you'd never return to. But that's where your life is, waiting. You won't be saved by becoming smaller. You won't be saved by becoming perfect. You won't be saved by thinking your way out. You'll be saved the moment you stop running from the part of you that already knows the way. You already know what you need. You've always known. But knowing requires listening. And listening requires trust. And trust begins with turning toward the part of you that frightens you. The part you swore was too much, too loud, too needy, too intense. That part isn't your enemy. It's your origin. And maybe you don't need to change. Maybe you need to return. Not to who you were, but to who you still are. Buried, waiting, burning, whole. You'll keep suffering until you let darkness in. You think suffering is something that happens to you, a problem to solve, a wound to treat, an enemy to escape. You work hard to heal, to grow, to let go. You repeat affirmations, rewrite your thoughts, reframe your story. But it keeps coming back, in silence, in dreams, in moods you can't explain. It visits you in the middle of the day like a chill from nowhere, a weight behind your ribs. You keep trying to rise above it. But what if you're suffering not because the darkness is attacking you, but because you won't let it in? Carl Jung knew that suffering doesn't vanish when you shine light on it. Sometimes it intensifies, because the parts of you in pain don't want to be exposed. They want to be accepted. The wound doesn't need explanation. It needs presence. And darkness is not always the opposite of healing. Sometimes it is the healing, the slow, painful digestion of what you were never allowed to feel. Darkness is not evil. Darkness is depth. It's where the roots grow. It's the womb, the cave, the silence that contains truth too raw for daylight. And every time you suffer, a part of you is crying from that place. But instead of listening, you reach for light, not warmth, but brightness, not truth, but resolution, something to shut the voice up, something to mute the ache. But the ache isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to bring you home. You suffer because something in you is not being met. A need, a memory, a buried scream. And you won't meet it until you stop resisting the dark. Not the external kind, the internal one. The mood you avoid, the feeling you rationalize, the silence you fill with noise. The part of you that doesn't want to improve, that wants to fall apart. Not for drama, for honesty. You think you're strong because you can hold yourself together, but real strength is letting yourself unravel. with intention. It's choosing to descend, to enter the sadness, the shame, the rage, not to wallow, not to blame, but to feel. Because the darkness is not chaos, it's memory. Emotion you weren't allowed to process, pain you weren't given time to grieve, and it's waiting to be held. You say you want to heal, but you keep looking away from the place where healing begins. The shadow, the lost self, the version of you that felt too ugly to include, too broken to invite, too raw to love. But that version still exists, and every time you meditate, journal, self-improve without acknowledging it, that version feels abandoned all over again. Jung called this the shadow, not because it's evil, but because it's unseen. And as long as it's unseen, it suffers. And as long as it suffers, you suffer. Not because you're being punished, but because your system is incomplete. You are rejecting a part of yourself, and it is crying out, not with words, but with patterns, with silence, with restlessness, with that dull ache that never leaves. You think the darkness will swallow you, that if you let it in, it will consume you. But the truth is, it's already here. It's already shaping your thoughts, your choices, your fears. And you're not overwhelmed because it's too big. You're overwhelmed because you're carrying it alone, pretending it isn't real. You don't have to fix it. You have to let it speak. Darkness isn't what breaks you. Denial is. Your sadness is not weakness, it's longing. Your anger is not violence, it's protection. Your despair is not the end, it's a threshold. But you'll never know that until you stop trying to outrun the dark. Stop trying to be okay. Stop trying to be healed. Just be with what's hurting, without commentary, without solution, just with. Because sometimes healing looks like giving up, not on life, but on the lie that you have to be light all the time. You are not here to be constant sunshine. You are a cycle, a rhythm. You are day and night, moon and sun, breath and break. And you cannot reclaim your wholeness until you remember the dark is sacred too. Jung didn't say, become your light. He said, make the darkness conscious. And that means sitting with what you hate in yourself, sitting with the shame, the grief, the hopelessness, not to change it, but to listen to what it's telling you. Maybe your sadness is asking you to slow down. Maybe your rage is showing you where you've betrayed yourself. Maybe your numbness is what kept you alive. And maybe the part of you that feels too much is the part that still believes healing is possible. Letting darkness in doesn't mean becoming negative. It means becoming real. It means creating a space inside where nothing is rejected. Not the guilt, not the jealousy, not the despair. All of it is you. All of it deserves to be heard. And once it is truly heard, something softens. The suffering doesn't disappear, but it shifts. It becomes less violent, less loud, less endless, because the moment you stop fighting the dark, you stop feeding it. Let it in. Let it sit beside you. Let it speak in its strange, wordless way. You don't have to agree. You don't have to like it. Just stay. Just breathe. Just listen. Because you'll keep suffering until you let darkness in. But once you do, the healing begins in silence. You don't have archetypes. They have you. You think your mind is yours, that the thoughts in your head are your own, that your behaviors are unique, that your struggles are personal. You think you choose how to love, how to fight, how to dream. You think your fears belong to you alone. But beneath the surface of your psychology, Deeper than a memory, deeper than belief, there's something older, something impersonal, something that does not care about your story, because it has lived it 1,000 times before you. You don't carry archetypes, they carry you. Carl Jung saw it first. Behind the ego, behind the persona, behind the fragmented memories we call self, lies a vast architecture of patterns, ancient blueprints etched into the psyche itself. They are not learned, they are inherited, born with you, not into you. Jung called them archetypes, universal forms of experience that repeat through dreams, myths, relationships, crises. They are not symbols you choose, they are structures that choose you. You didn't invent the hero. You stepped into its mold the moment you tried to prove yourself. You didn't create the mother. She was already waiting in your psyche, not just to nurture, but to control, to devour, to abandon. You didn't summon the trickster. He arrived every time you broke your own rules. These patterns are older than your personality. They are the programs that shape it. Archetypes don't care about who you think you are. They work beneath identity, orchestrating your stories with terrifying precision. You think you're falling in love. The lover archetype is awakening. You think you're making a choice. The ruler or the rebel inside you is clashing with the orphan you abandoned years ago. You think your nightmare is random, but it's a message from the shadow. Not your shadow, the shadow, the one that visits every soul when it begins to grow. You don't need to believe in them. They operate regardless. Like gravity, you can ignore them, but they won't ignore you. They live in your instincts, in your fantasies, in your failures. They possess you when you're weak. They rise in moments of stress, heartbreak, illness, betrayal. When the ego breaks, the archetype enters, not to punish, but to reveal. Because you are not a blank slate, you are a vessel, and your suffering is often the result of living a story whose script you never realized you were following. You wonder why the same roles repeat, why you always feel like the victim or the rescuer, or the exile or the destroyer. Because the archetype isn't done with you. Not until you bring it into consciousness, not until you stop playing the part blind. But there's a danger here. The archetypes are not safe. They are not symbols to decorate your personality. They are vast, impersonal forces. The warrior doesn't care about your peace. The mother doesn't care about your freedom. The sage doesn't care about your relationships. Each one seeks to complete itself, even if it destroys you in the process. Jung saw this clearly. When the archetype possesses you, you lose yourself. You become inflated or collapsed. You speak in voices that aren't yours. You follow scripts that feel fated. That's not madness, that's activation. The archetype has stepped in, and unless you recognize it, it will drive your life. You think you're free, but the archetype doesn't need your freedom. It needs embodiment. That's why initiation always feels like madness. The dissolution of the ego, as it's flooded with something bigger. You are not breaking, you are being reshaped, and it hurts. It confuses, it isolates, but it is necessary. Because until you know the archetype, you are the archetype, and it is using your name. So what can you do? Not dominate it. You can't win against a pattern older than civilization, but you can name it. You can watch it. You can learn its language. You can see the lover rising when your boundaries blur. You can feel the shadow stirring when you start projecting. You can hear the trickster laughing when your plans fall apart. And you can ask, What is this trying to teach me? What is this showing me about the parts of myself I haven't met? Because archetypes don't appear to punish. They appear to complete. Every one of them is a mirror. And if you look long enough with honesty, you'll see yourself, not your ego, yourself, the one who contains them all. Jung called this individuation, the lifelong process of integrating archetypes into conscious life, not becoming them, becoming the space that can hold them, so you are not devoured by the lover, but able to love without losing yourself. So you are not shattered by the shadow, but able to face your darkness without shame. So you are not ruled by the ruler, but able to lead without tyranny. But this path is narrow, and most never take it, because it requires you to stop identifying with your roles, to stop thinking of your suffering as personal, to admit that you are not the author of your story, only the one slowly learning how to read it. You don't have archetypes. They have you, and they will keep pulling the strings until you learn to recognize their hands. You weren't born to stay the same. You were made to break. You are told to become someone, to build yourself up, to find stability, to discover who you are and hold on tightly. You are told to grow into an identity, polish it, prove it, protect it. And so you did. You chose a path, a voice, a way of being. You chose words that fit, clothes that shield, thoughts that wouldn't be questioned. And it worked for a while, until it didn't. Because the self you built isn't breathing anymore. It's stiff, predictable, safe, maybe, but lifeless. And still you cling to it, because breaking feels like failure, because change feels like death. But what if it's the opposite? What if the breaking is the point? What if you weren't made to stay the same, but to collapse and reform again and again into someone deeper, truer, more whole? Carl Jung believed that transformation isn't linear. It doesn't arrive through comfort. It erupts through crisis, not because life is cruel, but because the self you think you are is only a temporary structure, a necessary illusion, meant to be torn down when it's outgrown, and you have outgrown it. That's what the tension is, the disorientation, the sadness with no source. It's not depression, it's pressure. Something inside you is knocking, not to ruin you, to change you. But you resist. Everyone does. You double down on what you know. You grip your routines like a lifeline. You explain your identity to yourself over and over just to keep the narrative intact. But your psyche knows the truth. It knows the structure is cracking, and it's not asking for your permission. It's preparing the fall. There will be a moment, maybe it's already here, when you realize you no longer believe in your own story. The words you use to describe yourself feel foreign. Your dreams feel scripted. Your thoughts feel borrowed. You look in the mirror and see the echo of someone you used to want to be. That's not failure. That's a sign. You're at the edge of transformation. But before anything new can emerge, the old must fall. This is the break, the inner earthquake, the unraveling that feels like chaos, but is actually reorganization. The pain you feel isn't punishment. It's the friction of the false self dissolving, of the deeper self rising, raw, unshaped, unformed. It doesn't come to affirm you, it comes to remake you, and it will not ask if you're ready. Jung called this process individuation, the slow, painful shedding of the ego's grip in favor of a more integrated self. A self that includes your shadow, your forgotten parts, your unlived lives. And to reach it, you have to break. You have to let go of who you were. You have to die symbolically, sometimes again and again, to create space for who you really are to come through. You weren't born to stay the same. You were born to rupture. And from that rupture, if you're willing to descend, to listen, to sit in the fire without flinching, something sacred emerges. Not perfection, not clarity, but truth. But the world doesn't teach this. The world teaches survival, coherence, performance. It teaches you to hold yourself together at any cost, and when you break, it tells you to patch the cracks quickly, to look away, to pretend. But the cracks are where the light enters. The collapse is where the real begins. There is nothing wrong with you for falling apart. There is something right with you for no longer being able to lie to yourself. The pieces you drop are not waste. They are offerings. And what grows in their place is not a better version of you. It's the version that was hidden behind the striving. Breaking doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've stopped resisting the pressure of growth. It means you're finally soft enough to change, strong enough to be dismantled, brave enough to let the mask fall. But don't expect it to be graceful. It won't be. It will be ugly, confusing. You will lose things, relationships, identities, dreams that once kept you warm. But in the rubble you'll find something ancient, a whisper, a vision, a piece of yourself you forgot. The child, the artist, the wild one, the seer. They've been waiting. Your suffering is not meaningless. It's transitional. You're not meant to stabilize. You're meant to evolve, cyclically, painfully, beautifully. And every time you do, something in you remembers, this is what I'm for, not to be solid, but to be real. So when the next wave comes, don't fight it. Don't try to hold the shape that no longer fits. Let it crack. Let it melt. Let the version of you that survived dissolve, so that the version of you that lives can emerge. You weren't born to stay the same. You were made to break and rebuild, wider, softer, truer. The real labyrinth isn't around you. It's inside. You think you're lost because the world is complex, because life keeps throwing you into confusion, contradiction, and conflict. You think it's the circumstances, the people, the timing. You think the chaos is out there, that if you could just organize the world, find clarity, make the right choice, the maze would open and you'd be free. But what if it's not the world that's the maze? What if the labyrinth is inside you, and always has been? Carl Jung knew the truth long before most dared to face it. The psyche is not a clean, linear landscape. It is a tangle of tunnels, dead ends, illusions, echoes. It is built on contradiction, on history you don't remember, on desires you can't explain, on fears that feel older than your own life. And no matter where you go, no matter how much light you shine outward, the maze waits inward, shifting, pulsing, breathing beneath your every thought. You carry it with you, into every relationship, every decision, every attempt to escape. The looping thoughts, the cycles that won't close, the questions that haunt you at 3 a.m. They're not glitches, they're signs. You are not navigating reality. You are navigating yourself. And yourself is a structure far older and stranger than you want to believe. You inherited this maze from your ancestors, from trauma, from archetypes carved into the human soul long before you were born. The minotaur you fear isn't out there. It's the part of you that was never given a name. The center of the labyrinth is not a place. It's a moment, a confrontation, a mirror, and no one else can walk you there. The ego wants straight lines, maps, guarantees, but the soul has none to offer. It pulls you in spirals. It returns you to the same theme in different costumes. It makes you fall in love with the same pattern again and again, until you finally see it, not as destiny, but as design. You call it misfortune. The psyche calls it guidance. There is no external exit. There is no perfect choice that will lead you out. There is only descent into memory, into symbol, into silence. The more you run, the deeper you go. The more you resist, the more the walls move. And when you finally stop, not collapse, but stop, the path begins to reveal itself. Not as escape, but as presence. The labyrinth isn't confusion, it's compression. It forces you inward until all distraction falls away, until all masks crack, until all borrowed truths lose their shine, and you are left with what is yours, the raw material of your soul. Your rage, your hunger, your despair, your vision, your voice, and the terrifying knowledge that no one can walk this for you. That's why the journey hurts, not because you're doing it wrong, because you're finally doing it honestly, without shortcuts, without bypassing, without pretending that the monster in the dark isn't your own reflection. Jung didn't offer comfort. He offered confrontation. He showed that the only way to transformation is through the center of the maze, through the part of you that scares you most, the shadow, the wound, the part you'd rather abandon. But what you abandon becomes the wall. What you refuse to face becomes the turn you miss every time. You've tried distraction. You've tried perfection. You've tried becoming what others needed. And now the maze is tight. The walls breathe. The same pain loops back again. That's not failure. That's design. The psyche will not let you go until you meet yourself. So go. Not with weapons, not with maps, with attention, with slowness, with the kind of listening that hears more than words. Watch the patterns, watch the symbols, watch your reactions. They are the torch that lights the passage. You'll feel lost. That's part of it. You'll think you're going backward. That's part of it too. But slowly, the maze begins to make sense. Not because it simplifies, but because you stop needing it to. You begin to see that every wall was built by protection, that the loops were repetitions of something unsaid, that the silence was a space waiting for your voice. And when you reach the center, not by force, but by surrender, you'll see that there was never a minotaur, only you, frightened, hidden, waiting, and you'll weep, not because of the darkness, but because of the years you spent trying to escape yourself. You are not lost in the world, you are lost in yourself. But that is not a curse. It is the way home. The labyrinth is not a trap. It is a teacher. And every dead end is a message. Every turn is a memory. Every fear is a doorway. You weren't meant to walk straight. You were meant to spiral, to circle inward, until you become the center you've been searching for. You were split before you were born. You think your life began at birth, that your story started when you took your first breath. But Lacan would say it began long before that. Not in your body, not even in your mother's womb, but in language, in the symbolic order, in the structure of meaning that awaited you like a net, ready to catch you and slice you into form. You were born already divided, already wounded, already a subject split in two. You were never whole. You were never one. The moment you entered the world, you stepped into a code that had no place for totality, only for absence, for lack, for the irreparable cut that makes you what you are. This is not a metaphor. It is structural. You were split by the signifier, by the moment when language, the system of names, categories, and laws, claimed you. It didn't describe you. It created you. You didn't find yourself in language. You were carved by it. Lacan calls this the barred subject, a self marked by a slash, divided between what it is and what it appears to be, between what it feels and what it can say, between the real and the symbolic, the body and the word, the image and the thing. You never lived in innocence. Even your first cries were already within a grammar, a space of expectation, interpretation, projection. Your name was chosen before you arrived, your gender assigned, your identity mapped by a world that needed you to fit. You were not welcomed as a mystery, but as a function, a placeholder in a story that began without you. And so you entered not life, but a system, not freedom, but form. And the form split you. This split is not a mistake, it's your condition. You are not whole because the subject is never whole. The idea of a true, undivided self, a core that is pure, stable, and complete, is a fantasy, a dangerous one, because it makes you believe that your suffering is a deviation, that your confusion is a flaw, but it isn't. It's the symptom of your structure. You are split, and you always were. The unconscious is the trace of this split. It speaks, but not in your voice. It dreams, but not in your will. It slips into your speech, your desires, your fears. It reminds you constantly that you are not the master of your mind, that you are inhabited, staged, that something in you is foreign, irreducible, other. You think you want things, but the unconscious wants through you. You think you know who you are, but that knowledge is fractured by the very structure that allows you to speak it. Even your mirror lies to you. When the infant first recognizes itself in the mirror, it feels joy. It sees a whole image, a complete form. But that image is not truth. It is fantasy. The body is not whole. It is fragmented, driven by impulses it cannot name. The mirror becomes a trap, a promise of unity that can never be fulfilled. And you chase that promise for the rest of your life, through love, through success, through identity. But all of it bends back to the same absence, the same cut. You live with this split every day. You say things you don't mean. You feel things you can't explain. You sabotage what you long for. You run from what you need. And each time you blame yourself, you think something is wrong. But what's wrong is the expectation that you should be coherent, that you should be one, that the you speaking and the you suffering should be the same person. But they never were. They never will be. Lacan's subject is not sick. It is structured, divided not by trauma but by language. And trauma enters where language fails, where the symbolic cannot absorb the real, where the scream cannot be named. You carry these gaps inside you, moments where words fall short, where the body trembles, where the image dissolves. And in those moments you feel the truth, that you are two, that the I who speaks is not the I who feels, that something in you escapes you, always. You try to heal, to integrate, to find the missing part, but there is no missing part. There is only the cut, the void that defines you. And in that void, desire is born, not to fill the gap, but to keep it open, to circulate around it, to speak through it. You don't desire to be whole, you desire to desire. Because desire is the proof that you are alive, that something in you still reaches, even if it never arrives. So what does this mean for you? That you are doomed to be broken. Number. It means you are free from the fantasy of unity, free to stop pretending that the goal is to be complete. The goal is to understand the structure, to speak from the place of the cut, not in spite of it, to live as a question, not an answer. You were split before you were born, and in that split, you became a subject, not a person, not an essence, but a point of rupture where language and silence meet. You are the trace of what cannot be said, the mark of what cannot be joined, the absence that gives shape to speech, to thought, to self. And maybe that's not tragedy. Maybe that's liberation, to know that you don't have to find your true self, that there is no mask to remove, no secret center to uncover. There is only the split and the echo it makes, and the strange, beautiful voice that rises from it, calling itself you. You don't want anything. Desire speaks through you. You believe that you want things, that you wake up each day with intentions, ambitions, cravings you call your own. But what if none of that is really yours? What if the desire you feel is not a choice, not even a symptom, but a ghost? A structure that formed before you could speak, before you had a name, before you were anything at all? What if desire is not your engine, but your parasite? Jacques Lacan didn't ask us to analyze our desires in search of a true self. He shattered the very idea that desire ever belonged to the self. For him, desire is always elsewhere. It doesn't emerge from the depths of your soul. It leaks in from the outside, from language, from others, from the symbolic web you were thrown into without your consent. The truth, Lacan whispers, is unbearable. You don't desire. Desire desires through you. When a child learns to speak, they don't simply acquire grammar. They are cut, sliced into being by the symbolic order. Language doesn't just allow expression. It structures the subject. It tells you what to want before you know what wanting is. You're handed words like love, success, freedom, as if they were tools. But they're traps. Each signifier, each word, comes preloaded with meaning, expectations, cultural weight. By speaking, you enter a world of meaning that you didn't create, but that now defines you. The moment you say I, you lie, because that I is already a performance written by others, a mask offered by the big other. The invisible web of norms, ideals, absences. You wear the mask of self, and behind it, there's only the desire of the other. Desire isn't need. A need can be satisfied, hunger can be fed, thirst can be quenched, but desire, real desire, is never satisfied. That's its nature. It's structured around lack, around what is missing, what is impossible. Lacan called this manque à être, the lack of being. You don't desire the object itself. You desire the desire. You want what the other seems to want, what the other seems to value. You chase it not to have it, but to keep the lack alive. You are kept alive by that lack. You are that lack. It's not a flaw. It's your structure. And so you move through life like a marionette with strings made of language, gestures shaped by inherited codes. You think you're falling in love. You're repeating a script, reciting a scene embedded in you by culture, cinema, your parents' expectations. You think you're being rebellious? That's a signifier too. Even rebellion exists within the grammar of the symbolic. There is no outside, no raw self. Just layers upon layers of reflections, projections, desires that reflect desires. Lacan's mirror stage isn't just about recognizing your body. It's about the trauma of alienation. The child sees itself in the mirror, whole, unified, controlled. But that image is a lie. It's idealized, imaginary. The real child is fragmented, chaotic, disoriented. That first misrecognition, "That's me," becomes the foundation of the ego, a fiction. And yet we build everything on it. We keep chasing that unity, that completeness we saw in the mirror. But it doesn't exist. It never did. Desire, then, is a wound that speaks, a hunger that forms not because you lack something material, but because you are structured by lack itself. The subject, you, is split, divided, between what you are and what you think you are, between the real and the imaginary, between the signifier and the thing it fails to name. And in that split, desire slithers in, not to heal you, but to keep the wound open. Even your dreams are not safe. The unconscious doesn't speak in truths or images. It speaks in riddles, in symbols, in slips of the tongue. For Lacan, the unconscious is structured like a language. It's not some primal chaos. It's a coded system. And that system speaks not your truths, but your place in the web of desire. Dreams, jokes, mistakes. They all reveal the machinery beneath. Not who you are, but how you're split. Not what you want, but where the lack lives. So what happens when you chase what you desire? When you finally reach the object of your longing? Disappointment, disillusionment. Why? Because the object was never the point. The objet petit a, Lacan's term for the elusive object cause of desire, is not the thing you think you want. It's the placeholder for the gap. The reminder that no object can fill you. No relationship can complete you. No achievement can restore your imaginary wholeness. And yet, you keep chasing. Because desire must circulate. It must never end. If it ends, you vanish. This is why love feels like madness. Because it is. When you love, you don't meet the other person. You meet your lack through them. You project. You hallucinate. You attach to what you think they offer. Recognition, completion, transcendence. But that's not love. That's misrecognition. That's the fantasy of union, where none is possible. And when the illusion fades, you feel betrayed. But it wasn't they who betrayed you. It was your own structure speaking through them, then withdrawing. There's no cure for this. Lacan offers no salvation, only lucidity. He doesn't want you to be happy. He wants you to understand why happiness is always delayed, why fulfillment always slips through your fingers, why even when you get everything you wanted, you still feel empty, because the desire wasn't yours, because the object wasn't real, because the lack is eternal. And yet there's a kind of freedom in that. If you're not the author of your desires, you're not their prisoner either. You can stop pretending to find yourself in things, in people, in ideals. You can stop searching for the perfect sentence, the perfect lover, the perfect version of you. You can rest, not in peace, but in awareness that desire will continue to speak through you, that you are a haunted text, a sentence still being written by forces you cannot name. And that's okay, because even if you don't want anything, the silence between your wants still says everything. You're not a person. You're a misunderstood signifier. You were never whole. Not once. Not for a second. The image you hold of yourself, a self-contained, consistent identity, a name that points to something real, something coherent, is a fiction, a linguistic illusion, a borrowed signifier no one understands, not even you. Lacan didn't just challenge the ego, he dismantled it. You are not a person. You are a symptom of language, a ripple in the chain of signifiers, a misunderstanding that mistook itself for something solid. When you say I, there is no unified being beneath it. There's only an echo, a reference, a mask. And that mask isn't even yours. It's given to you by the big other, that invisible system of meaning, language, and expectation that colonized your mind before you ever spoke a word. Every word you use carries a weight you didn't choose. You think language expresses you, but it expresses the lack that formed you. Language is not a tool, it's a trap. When you enter it, you're cut off from the real, from the raw chaos of what is. You become something that can be said, and what can be said is always a distortion, always partial, always caught in the web of symbolic codes you'll never master. You don't speak language. Language speaks you. Your thoughts are not yours. They're structured by rules, associations, absences. And the most terrifying part? There is no final meaning, no master signifier. Every word refers to another, and that one to another still, in an infinite regress of references with no origin. Lacan called this the chain of signifiers, a language without center, a world where meaning is always deferred. You chase the truth of who you are through words, but words never land. They slip, they fail, they betray you. When you say love, you imagine something warm, whole, mutual. But what does the other hear? What do they fill that word with? Their ghosts, their traumas, their myths. Misunderstanding is not a failure. It's the rule. It's the structure. You are misunderstood because you are a misunderstanding. Because every word you use is haunted. And you are a name that was given to you, a sound that became your anchor. But that sound is just a floating signifier. It doesn't point to a stable reality. It points to a network of projections, memories, fictions. Your parents called you that before they knew you. Your friends say it without knowing what it means. You repeat it to yourself like a mantra, as if saying, I enough times will conjure something real. But there's nothing underneath, no essential self, no solid core, just the name trying to be the thing. But it's not. You're caught in the imaginary, in the mirror. The ego, Lacan says, is formed when the child sees its reflection and mistakes it for the self. That clean, unified image becomes the I. But the child is not unified. It's a chaos of sensations, drives, fragments. The reflection is a lie, but we cling to it. We polish it. We perform it. We suffer for it. You suffer for being a signifier you cannot live up to. You suffer for being mistaken. By others, by yourself, by the very language that gave you form. The real, that unnameable, unsymbolizable core of being, is forever lost. You can't return to it. You can't express it. Every time you try, language filters it, censors it, bends it into something digestible, and what remains is never the real, only its absence. That absence is what drives you, what torments you, what constructs you. You desire not a thing but the impossible return to that real. You chase it in love, in art, in breakdowns, but it never comes, only silence, or noise pretending to be meaning. You might think therapy is about discovering your true self, but for Lacan, it's about realizing there is no such thing. There is no true self beneath the masks, only more masks, more signifiers, more slips. What you call healing is just a new way of speaking, a new syntax for your symptom. You don't get cured, you get rewritten. Even your suffering is a phrase, a structure. You cry not from your soul, but from the space language doesn't reach. And still, you cry in words. You try to name it, to pin it down. But pain escapes. It leaks between sentences. It stains meaning. It resists capture. That's why it hurts. That's why it lingers, because it reminds you that you are a surface stitched together by names, and beneath it, nothing you can say. So who are you? You're not your thoughts. They're borrowed. You're not your feelings. They're coded. You're not your memories. They're narrated. You are what others imagine when they hear your name. And even that is unstable. You are a misunderstood signifier, a signal misread, a message interrupted. But maybe that's freedom. If there's no fixed self, then you're not doomed to repeat one version of you forever. You're a space where meaning tries and fails to take hold. You're a moment in the sentence of history, a metaphor in someone else's dream, and that's enough. Let the misunderstanding speak. Let it echo. You'll never be understood, and that's the only truth you'll ever fully inhabit. You are what others see, and nothing more. You think you are someone. You think your thoughts, your memories, your inner life make you real. But what if you only exist when someone is looking? What if all your depth is just the shadow cast by the gaze of the other? For Jacques Lacan, the subject is not what it thinks it is. It is what it appears to be in the eyes of others. Not because others know you better, but because there is no you outside their gaze. You are not a person. You are a reflection, a posture, an answer to a question you never asked. What do they see when they look at me? The answer changes everything. It is not you who decides who you are. It is the look, the gaze, the watching. We are born into mirrors. First, the literal mirror, the one where a child catches its reflection and says, "That's me." That moment, Lacan tells us, is a misrecognition, a méconnaissance. The child doesn't recognize itself. It imagines an image that is coherent, whole, coordinated. But the child itself is fragmented, weak, disoriented. That image is a fiction, and from that moment on you become addicted to fictions. You build yourself on what you look like, what others see, what you think others think you are. The ego is a mirror, a lie you believe because it's visible. But it doesn't stop there. There is another mirror, a darker one, not the one you look into, but the one that looks into you. The symbolic gaze of the big other, society, language, culture, norms, the invisible eye that watches, judges, defines. You do not act freely. You act as though being watched. Even when no one is there, you perform. You speak to be heard. You dress to be seen. You exist in anticipation of the look, and that look structures you. It tells you what is desirable, what is shameful, what is allowed. You internalize it. You become it. The eye outside becomes the voice inside. You feel seen. That can feel good, powerful, validating. But it can also be a curse. To be seen is to be captured, to be frozen. You become an object, a thing. The moment someone sees you, you stop being fluid. You are fixed, reduced, categorized. And yet, you chase that gaze. You crave recognition. You want to be understood, desired, noticed, even though you know that to be seen is to be misread. The look never captures the truth. It can't, because there is no truth, only appearances. Lacan's concept of the gaze is not about eyes. It's about the presence of presence, about being caught in a net of signifiers that you didn't weave. The gaze is the point where the other sees you, not as you see yourself, but as an object in their symbolic system. You become a character in someone else's story. You are narrated by them. You are their fantasy, and that fantasy shapes how you see yourself. You try to match it or fight it, but either way, you are trapped. Have you ever felt the weight of being looked at? The way your posture changes, the way your thoughts freeze? That is the power of the gaze. It paralyzes, it exposes. It doesn't need eyes, it just needs the possibility of being seen. You check your reflection not to see yourself, but to see what others might see. You become their witness, and in that act, you disappear. You build your life trying to be someone, but that someone is a collage of gazes, a sculpture shaped by feedback, shame, admiration, rejection. You are haunted by how you appear, not to yourself, but to them. You wear yourself like a costume, forgetting that there is no actor underneath. Just more fabric, more mirrors, more scenes performed under a light you never turned on. Love complicates this further. In love, you long to be truly seen, to be known beyond the surface. But what if that's impossible? What if even love is just another gaze, another fantasy? You don't fall in love with someone. You fall in love with the image they allow you to have of yourself. You love the person who reflects you back in a more bearable form. And when that reflection breaks, so does the love. There is no way out. You cannot escape the gaze because you are made of it. You are stitched together by how others see you. You are not an essence. You are a projection. You are not your truth. You are your presentation. And even that is not yours. You perform it, but you didn't write it. The script was waiting for you long before you were born. So what now? Despair, maybe, or lucidity. Maybe there is peace in knowing that you don't have to find your true self, that there is nothing behind the mask, just space, just absence, just the hollow where a gaze once landed and called you you. You are what others see, and nothing more. But maybe that's not a sentence. Maybe that's a freedom, a disappearing act, a dance in the hall of mirrors, no center, no self, just reflections endlessly misreading each other. And in that blur, you live. You're not free. You're just misreading the law. You believe you are free. You believe your choices are yours, your decisions self-determined, your desires spontaneous. But freedom is the most seductive illusion of all. Lacan didn't set out to liberate the subject. He set out to show that it is never free, that what you take for freedom is simply misrecognition of the law. You don't escape structure. You confuse it for yourself. You speak not because you want to, but because the law speaks through you. You act not in freedom, but in obedience to a code you don't know you're following. And the most devastating part, you think that by resisting the law, you are proving your freedom. But you are still speaking its language, still trapped in its grammar. Lacan's law is not the law of courts or constitutions. It's the law of the symbolic order, the invisible, inescapable framework of language, culture, and meaning into which you are born. You don't choose it. You don't question it. You are structured by it before you can speak. It shapes your desires, your sense of right and wrong, your expectations of love, identity, power. The symbolic law is not enforced by police. It's enforced by your very sense of self. You internalize it. You become it. You dream of freedom, but even your dream follows its syntax. When you rebel, you think you're breaking free. But Lacan would say, your rebellion is already predicted by the law. The symbolic contains its own transgressions. It knows how to absorb them. Even the fantasy of the outlaw, the outsider, the iconoclast. It's part of the story. You are not outside the system. You are its symptom, and your acts of defiance only prove how deeply you are inscribed in it. This is why guilt haunts you even when you've done nothing wrong. Why shame creeps in when you try to speak your truth. You feel watched, judged, measured, not by anyone in particular, but by the big other. The name Lacan gives to the abstract authority of the symbolic order. It is not a person. It is the place from which meaning comes. The gaze that structures how you think, feel, act. It tells you what is normal, what is desirable, what is forbidden. And even when you reject it, you are still referencing it, still speaking from within its architecture. Desire itself is caught in this trap. You think your desire is free, but desire is structured by the law. The prohibition creates the object. What is forbidden becomes desirable. What is lost becomes sacred. The very lack you feel, the ache, the longing, the craving, is installed in you by the structure. It doesn't point to a real object. It points to the hole in the symbolic, the space where something was never given a name, and you chase it, calling it love or success or truth. But it's just the echo of the law. This is why freedom often feels empty, why achieving what you thought you wanted leaves you restless, disoriented, hollow. Because the desire was never yours. It was a product of the law, and the object was never what you really wanted. It was a placeholder for the lack. The law creates both the desire and the object, and then tells you you are free to choose. But there is no choosing, only circulating through a structure that was already written. Even your ethics are part of the script. You think you choose good over evil, but good and evil are categories inherited from the symbolic. You don't invent them, you repeat them. Even the act of questioning morality is a function of the moral code itself. You can't get outside. There is no outside. Every step you take toward freedom is a step deeper into the labyrinth of the law. So what is left? If you are not free, are you just a puppet? A machine? A ghost caught in a linguistic trap? Maybe. But Lacan doesn't offer despair. He offers a mirror. He wants you to see how deeply the law is in you, how even your resistance is a function of structure. Not to make you hopeless, but to make you lucid, to show you the limits of your autonomy so that you stop chasing illusions and begin listening to the silence beneath the law. There is a point where language fails, where the symbolic cracks. Lacan calls this the real. It is not freedom, but it is outside meaning. It cannot be symbolized. It cannot be absorbed. It is trauma, rupture, the scream that has no sentence. And in that scream, something like truth flickers. Not a liberating truth, not a comforting one, but a truth that does not obey. Maybe you are not free, but maybe freedom was never the point. Maybe the goal is to recognize the law, to trace its shape in your thoughts, your words, your failures, and then to stand, not outside it, but aware of it. To speak knowing that you are spoken, to act knowing that you are enacted, and in that moment of lucidity, to stop pretending. You're not free, but you are conscious, and sometimes that's enough. Your mind is a theater of lack. There is something missing in you. You've always known it. You've never been able to name it, but it haunts you like a shadow that doesn't follow the rules of light. It's not pain, not sadness, not even emptiness. It's something deeper, a structural absence, a gap at the heart of your being that no pleasure, no love, no success has ever filled. You call it loneliness or longing or desire, but Lacan calls it what it is, lack. Not a flaw, not a symptom, but the core of your subjectivity. Your mind is not a palace, not a temple, not a machine. It is a theater, and the stage is built on that lack. You think of desire as a fire, as something burning in you, pushing you toward things. But desire is not heat. It's not passion. It's the cold architecture of what isn't there. You desire not because you want something, but because something is missing. And that absence becomes the frame. Every thought you have is cast against it. Every sentence you speak echoes through it. It's the whole around which your psyche orbits, endlessly, desperately, elegantly. This is why fulfillment always disappoints, why the moment of arrival is followed by the itch of absence, because the object of desire was never meant to satisfy you. It was only a stand-in, a symbol for something ungraspable. Lacan calls this the objet pétier, the object cause of desire. Not the thing you want, but the placeholder for what can never be possessed. The mind clings to this object like a talisman, projects onto it fantasies of completion. But when you get it, the fantasy collapses. Because the object was never the source, the lack was. And so, the theater continues. You play roles, you speak lines, you dress in meanings borrowed from culture, memory, dreams. But beneath the costume, there is no character, only absence in the shape of a subject. You are the performance of a gap, a fiction sustained by repetition. The audience is the big other, the symbolic order, society, language. You perform for its gaze, even when you're alone. Especially when you're alone. Thoughts appear in your mind not as truths, but as symptoms. Symptoms of the structure. You think you're thinking freely, but you're enacting a script you never wrote. Your fantasies are staged. Your fears are directed. Your internal monologue is a rehearsal for someone else's ear. Even your silence is filled with invisible dialogue. What you repress doesn't vanish. It hides in the wings, waiting for its cue. The unconscious is not a wild animal. It's a playwright with a sense of irony, and the theater never closes. But the stage isn't neutral. It is shaped by what it lacks. The curtain rises on a wound, a split. You are divided between the image you present and the self that isn't there, between what you think you are and what the other sees, between the signifier and the real. And in that split, the play begins. You move, speak, desire, not to close the gap, but to keep it alive. Because without the lack, there would be no play, no subject, no you. And yet the mind rebels. It wants to forget the stage. It wants to believe the script is real. It wants to collapse the distance between desire and satisfaction. This is why people cling to ideologies, to lovers, to careers. Not to possess them, but to protect themselves from the void beneath. to pretend that the theater has walls, has exits, has meaning, but it doesn't. It only has curtains and mirrors and echoes. Lacan doesn't offer escape. He doesn't offer healing. He offers awareness, to know that your pain is not a personal defect, but a structural condition, that your longing is not a failure, but your form, that your mind is not broken, it is theatrical. Its stages lack so that you can move, speak, be, and the tragedy is not that you lack. The tragedy is pretending that you don't. There is beauty here, too. Not the beauty of resolution, but of tension, of drama, of becoming. The mind is a space where the impossible tries to speak, where the absent writes itself into scenes, where the ghost of what cannot be makes itself visible through you. Your symptoms are soliloquies. Your dreams are metaphors. Your breakdowns are rehearsals for truths too large to say directly. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the echo behind the thoughts, the breath between the lines, the real brushing against the symbolic, never entering, only disturbing, only reminding that no matter how perfect the performance, the stage is cracked, and that crack is where you are born. So don't try to fill the lack. Don't try to close the play. Don't search for the final act. There is none. The point is not to resolve the plot. The point is to let it unfold. You are the theater, the stage, the absence, and every thought you think is just one more light turning on in the dark, revealing, for a moment, what isn't there. You can't escape the other, because you are the other. You spend your whole life trying to be yourself, to find something pure, untouched, authentic within you. But what if that's the ultimate illusion? What if the deepest parts of you, your desires, your thoughts, your voice, were never yours to begin with? Lacan didn't just suggest that we are influenced by others. He claimed something far more unsettling. There is no self without the other. In fact, the self is the other. You are made of gazes, expectations, codes, projections. You do not stand outside them. You are composed of them. So when you try to escape the other, to reject it, silence it, overcome it, you're only rejecting yourself, because there is no you beyond that structure. There is no self before the mirror. The other is not another person. It is the invisible web of language, law, and meaning that structures how you see, feel, and desire. It's the one who speaks before you do, who names things for you, who decides what is allowed, what is forbidden, what is possible. The big other, as Lacan calls it, is not someone watching. It is the symbolic system itself. You enter it the moment you are born into language. And from that moment on, you are no longer alone. Every thought you form, every sentence you speak, every wish you carry is already within its domain. You believe your desire is yours. But Lacan shows that desire is always the desire of the other. You desire what you believe the other desires. What you think will make you visible, lovable, accepted. Your desire is shaped not by your soul, but by the gaze. You chase things not because they fulfill you, but because they echo the structure, because they fit the scene, the fantasy, the grammar of recognition. And when you rebel, when you scream, "I am not what they want," that scream is still directed toward the other, still seeking acknowledgement, still begging to be seen. Even your image is not yours. The mirror stage, when the infant recognizes itself in a reflection, is not a triumph. It is a wound. The child sees a whole controlled image of itself and takes it as the self. But that image, is false. The child is fragmented, chaotic, pre-verbal, and so begins the split between what you are and what you must appear to be. You spend your life chasing that false unity, trying to become the person you saw, the person others see, the person you think they want. You call it growth, you call it identity, but it's just the endless attempt to reconcile with the other. This is why love hurts, why being seen is never pure. You want to be loved for who you are, but who you are is already filtered through the other, already performed, already an answer to a question you didn't write. You don't show yourself, you offer a version, and the one who loves you, they don't see you. They see their own reflection in your performance. Love becomes a loop, a mirrored misunderstanding, a dance of projections. And in that dance, you disappear. There is no escape. Even when you close your eyes, the other is inside you. Its codes speak in your voice. Its laws guide your guilt. Its judgments whisper in your silences. You try to be authentic, but authenticity is already a category of the symbolic. You try to be free, but freedom is framed by the language you use to define it. The other is not outside. It is the interior of your interior, the ghost in the mirror, the echo in your name. And yet, there is a moment of lucidity in this, when you stop trying to find a pure self, when you stop fleeing the other, you begin to see the architecture, the lines of the stage, the strings in the puppet show. You realize your suffering is not personal. It is structural. You are not broken. You are written. You were always written. Lacan doesn't offer a cure. He doesn't promise escape, but he offers a shift. From the question, who am I really, to what speaks through me? And that question opens space, not for liberation, but for awareness, for witnessing the other as it moves in your thoughts, dresses your fantasies, shapes your silence. You begin to see the contours of the absence you've always carried. And in that absence, something like truth appears. So stop searching for the edge of the other. There is none. You are not outside. You never were. You are not a rebel. You are a sentence written in the grammar of the gaze. You are not free. You are the echo of a voice that came before you. But maybe that's not tragic. Maybe there is beauty in being part of something larger, in knowing that you are a symptom, yes, but a conscious one. A question the other cannot fully answer, a silence in the middle of the code. You can't escape the other, because you are the other. And when you finally stop running, you might hear, in the quiet, not a command, but a murmur. Not a judgment, but a question. Now that you know you're made of me, what will you say? There's no truth, only what can't be said. You've spent your life chasing the truth. You thought it lived in words, in clarity, in confessions, in theories, in the perfect sentence that could finally explain everything. But what if the truth isn't something you can say? What if the moment you speak it, it's already lost? Lacan didn't treat language as a transparent window to truth. He treated it as a wall, a structure that both creates meaning and conceals what can never be known. For him, the truth isn't what you speak. It's what slips through your speech, what breaks your sentences, what stutters in your voice. The truth is not revealed in language. It is deformed by it. There's no truth, only what can't be said. You think a word points to a thing, that love means love, pain means pain, I means you. But words never land on the thing itself. They float above it, circle it, disguise it. Every word is a signifier, pointing not to reality, but to another signifier, and another, and another. The chain of meaning never ends. There is no bottom, no anchor, only deferral. You chase truth like a horizon, but each step forward reveals only another layer of language, another metaphor, another misrecognition. Even when you try to be honest, language betrays you. You say, "I'm fine," when you're falling apart. You say, "I love you," when you mean, "Don't leave me." You say, "I'm sorry," when you're drowning in resentment. Lacan would say, the unconscious speaks, but it doesn't say what you think it does. It says what you can't say, in slips, in silences, in the tension between what you meant and what came out. The truth is not in the words, it's in the fracture between them. The subject for Lacan is divided. You are not one. You are split between the speaking I and the unknown force that distorts what is spoken. You believe you say things, but you are also said, spoken by something deeper, something that doesn't care about coherence or comfort or truth. It only wants to make itself felt, not as clarity, but as rupture. You are a sentence with a tear in the middle, and that tear is the truth. This is why therapy doesn't work by understanding. It works by listening to the break, the stumble, the repetition, the word you didn't mean to say, the dream you can't explain, the fantasy you're ashamed of. Lacan didn't want you to find a clear answer. He wanted you to hear what your structure was hiding, to catch the real, not in the sentence, but in the crack. The real is what resists symbolization. It's what cannot be said, cannot be integrated into language, cannot be known. It's the trauma that remains after explanation, the absence that no word can cover, the scream without sound. You feel it when a sentence fails, when you try to speak and something collapses inside you. That collapse, that vertigo, is truth. And still we speak, we write, we confess, not to reach the truth but to circle it, to draw lines around it, to protect ourselves from what it would do if we let it speak. Because the truth isn't healing, it's shattering. It doesn't make sense. It undoes sense. It breaks the fantasy of wholeness, of control, of knowing who you are. The truth is not what you find, it's what you can't avoid. This is why people fear silence, why they fill every gap with noise, with content, with explanations. Because the silence is not empty, it's full. It's where the unspeakable waits, the shame, the desire, the wound, the real. And when it seeps into speech, when it slips past the signifiers, it doesn't clarify, it disturbs. It leaves you trembling, staring at your own mouth, unsure of what you just said. So what should you do? Stop speaking? Abandon language? Number Lacan doesn't ask for silence. He asked for precision, for attention, to speak knowing that your words don't hold truth, but trace its absence, to listen for what breaks in the sentence, to watch your own speech like a dream, and in that dream, to recognize not yourself, but the cut that made you. You will never say the truth, but you can say around it. You can feel its weight in the words you avoid, the names you can't pronounce, the stories you retell again and again. You can hear it in the laugh that shouldn't have happened, the tear that surprised you, the thought that embarrassed you, the desire that made no sense. And in all of that, the truth is there, not present, but insistent. There's no truth, only what can't be said, and maybe that's enough. Maybe what matters is not saying it, but knowing it's there, watching it haunt your language, feeling it press against the walls of your voice. You will never capture it, but you can stand where the sentence ends and listen. Love is just miscommunication with style. You think love is when two people understand each other perfectly, when they meet soul to soul, word to word, in clarity and unity. But what if love is not understanding, but misrecognition, not closeness, but distance misunderstood as closeness? Lacan didn't romanticize love. He disassembled it. He tore it down to its symbolic bones. For him, love isn't the fulfillment of desire. It's the performance of lack, a beautiful miscommunication, a mistake you don't want to correct. Because in that mistake, you find meaning, not the truth of who the other is, but the fantasy of who they could be for you. Love speaks, but it does not say what it thinks it says. It speaks in riddles, in symbols, in projections. You don't fall in love with the person in front of you. You fall in love with the image your unconscious casts onto them, with the role they unknowingly step into in the private theater of your mind. You fall in love with a version of yourself reflected back, altered, idealized, mirrored. You love the one who lets you believe in something whole, something complete, something that could, for once, silence the lack. But the lack doesn't disappear. It deepens. You say, "I love you," but what do you mean? Are you saying, "I see you," or "I need you," or "don't leave me"? Or are you just speaking into the void, hoping for an echo that will stabilize you? The phrase doesn't hold what you want it to. It carries more weight than it can bear. And yet, you say it. Because to not say it would be worse. Because love is what happens in the cracks between language and meaning. Lacan's concept of love is not sentimental. He said, love is giving something you don't have to someone who doesn't want it. This isn't cynicism. It's precision. You give in love not from fullness, but from lack. You offer the other person a part of your absence, your incompleteness, your desire to be made whole. And they in turn do the same. But neither of you can fill the other. Because the lack is not circumstantial. It is structural, built into the subject from the very beginning. This is why love is so often painful. It demands recognition, but can never provide it. You want to be seen, truly seen. But to be seen is to be reduced, to be captured. You want to be known, but you don't even know yourself. You want to feel complete, but you're constructed around a void. And so love becomes a negotiation between longing and impossibility, between speech and silence, between two people who can never fully meet, but pretend they can. And in that pretending, create something real. Jealousy, insecurity, obsession. These aren't aberrations of love. They are its symptoms. They reveal the truth that love is not safe. It is not pure. It is a structure built on misrecognition. You fear losing the other not because they complete you, but because they hold the fantasy you projected. Without them, the fantasy collapses, and you are left face to face with the lack again. The raw, unbearable knowledge that no one can rescue you from yourself. Even sex doesn't close the gap. Lacan famously said, "There is no sexual relationship." Not because people don't have sex, but because sex doesn't symbolize what we want it to. It doesn't bridge the divide between subjects. It doesn't erase the split. It intensifies it. You bring your body, your desire, your need. But what meets you is not the other person, but their fantasy, their absence, their own choreography of lack. You never touch them, not really. You touch the place where their desire hides. And yet, you love. You keep loving. You write poems, send texts, build lives together. Why? Because even though love is a miscommunication, it's a meaningful one. It creates structure. It allows the subject to circulate. It gives shape to the void. It lets you speak in a language that breaks and bends under the weight of what cannot be said. It offers no guarantees, no wholeness, but it offers a space where you can be seen, even if inaccurately. And sometimes that's enough. Lacan doesn't say love is false. He says it's symbolic, a gesture, a signifier for the unspeakable. You love not because the other is complete, but because you are not. You love in absence, through absence. You love as a way to survive the fact that no one can give you what you lack. You love knowing it will not be enough, and you do it anyway. So what is love, really? A story told between silences, a rhythm of glances, misunderstandings, longings, a sentence that trails off, a word misheard, and in that mishearing, beauty, not because it reveals the truth, but because it lets you dance around it, because it lets you speak the unspeakable in a form that doesn't demand precision, only presence. Love is just miscommunication with style, and in that style, we live. Sex is impossible. That's why we keep trying. You think sex is the most intimate thing two people can share, that it brings bodies together, silences distance, fuses minds, hearts, and flesh. But Lacan disagrees, radically, coldly, brilliantly. For him, sex doesn't bridge the gap, it reveals it. It doesn't unify, it exposes division. His most infamous statement, "There is no sexual relationship," is not a moral judgment. It is a structural fact. There is no direct relationship between two subjects through sex. No perfect union. No symmetry. No final recognition. Sex is not the answer. It's the symptom. What does it mean to say there is no sexual relationship? It means that sex does not deliver what we imagine it will. That the idea of sexual harmony, two people desiring each other perfectly, reciprocally with full understanding, is a fantasy, an impossible one, because the subject is split, always, and desire is asymmetrical. It doesn't move in clean lines. It deviates, twists, misfires. You don't desire the other, you desire the desire you believe they have for you. You desire through the gaze of the other, through language, through symbols. Sex tries to bypass that, but it can't. It's already inside it. Lacan says that sexuality is structured like a language, which means it's full of codes, substitutions, metaphors. You don't just want a body. You want what that body signifies: power, recognition, validation, control, surrender. You want the impossible object, the object pétier, the thing that promises to complete you, to restore the lost unity you never had. But it never delivers. The moment passes, the body cools, the silence returns, and the lack remains. So why do we keep trying? Why do we chase the sexual act if it never gives us what we want? Because we have no choice. Because the impossibility itself is what fuels the desire. You don't want the object. You want the chase, the deferral, the tension, the theater of seduction, projection, and misunderstanding. You want the scene, not the resolution. Because resolution would end the desire. And without desire, what are you? The genders don't match, not structurally. Lacan says that man and woman are positions in language, not biological facts. They do not complement each other. They misalign. One speaks from the side of all, the other from the side of not all. Their relation is not one of fusion, but of failed symmetry. And this failure is not a problem. It is the condition of sexuality itself. You try to speak to each other. You try to reach. But something doesn't connect. The message goes astray. And in that gap, desire emerges. Not as connection, but as longing. Pornography promises to simulate the relationship, to show what works, but it only stages the fantasy. It shows bodies without lack, pleasure without silence. But even in the most graphic image, the real slips in. The part that doesn't fit, the gaze that feels off, the frame that reveals too much, the moment that feels less like arousal and more like alienation. Sex in fantasy is neat. In reality, it's awkward, fragmented, anxious, because the symbolic cannot contain the real. Lovers try to compensate with rituals, with roles, with words like make love. But making love doesn't make relationship. It makes gesture, symbol, performance. You lie in each other's arms thinking you've merged, but you haven't. You've only positioned your lacks beside one another and hoped they would cancel out. But they don't. They echo. They amplify. This is why sex can be terrifying, not because of what it is, but because of what it isn't. It promises unity, but delivers exposure. It uncovers how little you know the other, how much of yourself is still hidden, how little language can do when flesh speaks, or fails to. And yet, you keep returning. You keep trying, not because you believe in the fantasy, but because it structures your being. Lacan's point is not that sex is meaningless. It's that its meaning is unstable, deferred, symbolic. You don't have sex with the other person. You have sex with the phantasm, with what they represent to you. And they do the same. It's not mutuality. It's overlap, temporary, misaligned, poetic, tragic. But maybe that's not a failure. Maybe the impossibility is what makes it human, what makes it bearable, what gives it beauty. Two people meeting not in perfect connection, but in shared disconnection. Not erasing the lack, but holding it together, like hands around a silence. There is no sexual relationship, but there is desire. There is attempt. There is the messy, sacred, awkward effort to touch the untouchable. And sometimes that is enough. You'll never complete each other, but you might share a moment of incompletion. And in that moment, fleeting, fractured, something real passes between you. Not fulfillment, but recognition that you are both trying to cross an impossible distance, and that neither of you will ever stop. That's why we keep trying.